You're listening to the Property Management Excellence Podcast for insights that drive rapid rental growth.
Welcome back. Great to have you with us. Alex Whitlock with you, co-founder of Managed, also director of REB. Love hosting the PMX podcast. It gives me an opportunity to, amongst other things, say what's on my mind. But more importantly, it gives me an opportunity to bring on guests to use as a sounding board. I'm an investor, and I've been an investor for many, many years. I haven't ever worked in the real estate industry, but I'm very, very close to particularly what property managers deliver to investors, having used PMs throughout my investment journey and will always continue to do so. But it occurs to me frequently, now being a lot closer to the property management industry, that there are a lot that don't get it right, in my opinion. Now, I'm not being critical or harsh, but my observations are, as with any industry, that things can be done better. So I thought I'd bring somebody on the show who I've known for a long, long time. And he was actually at the beginning of the PMX journey. So we launched PMX last year at a conference and awards. And he actually emceed the conference and also presented at one of the sessions. So I'm really pleased to introduce Tom Panos. You will know Tom. He's been in the industry for many, many years, owner of RealEstate Gym, leading trainer, mentor, and indeed a crowned thought leader. But also, you know, Tom understands journalism. He understands media. He's a regular columnist for news.com. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a great topic that you're unpacking here.
Tom, there's many reasons why I wanted to bring you on. One of them is because you say exactly what you think. You don't soft soap things. You're honest. And I think that's important in business. The other thing is an area that I am not an expert on. Again, I have no real estate background. Is what I'd like to look at, amongst other things, is what we can look at from sales excellence. And I'll just give you, and there's something happened this week, Tom, which kind of irritated me. I was talking to a customer and, you know, so our platform has owner portal, tenant portal, tradie portal, and then of course the PM platform, right? And the proposition is that our customers push down the work through the portals. So owners use their portal, they communicate on the portal, they pay and receive, you know, they'll pay for maintenance on the portal, they'll receive rent on the portal, tenants pay their rent on the portal. So agencies that use the platform well push down the workload to the platform, to the portal level. And I was talking to one of our customers and they said, no, our owners don't use the portal. Alex, they don't use the portal. They don't like to use the portal. And I thought, okay. And they said, no, they like us. They will email us or they will send us a text or they'll phone us and we go away and do all of the things they want us to do. And I thought, well, that's really kind of quite backward. Why would you be pushed around by your customers? Now, it might sound, people tuning in, what I'm saying might sound, you know, offensive. But Tom, I'm going to tell you, right? So I've sold properties. I use the same agent, one of our top 100 agents from REB, a young guy called William Chan, who's had a very, very good sales career, now runs his own agency. And he educated me. I learned so much selling, being a vendor with William. So I decided I was going to sell my property. I'd known William for several years before. He came around to my property. I said, William, I'm going to sell. You're going to be the agent. I'm really looking forward to it. He said, Alex, I'm so pleased to work with you. And I said, oh, look, I don't really want to do too much, William, you know. And so my plan was to sell the property. He said, Alex, look, I'm really sorry, but you're going to have to do the things that I tell you to do to get success. You know, I'm going to make sure that we sell your property for the maximum price. We're going to have a great campaign. We're going to get a lot of prospective buyers along, but you're going to need to do what I tell you to do. And Tom, I did every single miserable thing that he told me to do.
Yeah.
Which included decorating the house. Look, I won't bore you with every single thing. By the time I decorated, landscaped, it looked better than when I bought it. I didn't want to move. And he got me way above the sales price that I expected to get. The point here, Tom, is he, at that point of inflection where I start my relationship with him, he dictated the terms to me to get the best outcomes. I don't believe in many cases that PMs have the confidence to do this with the owners they onboard.
Yeah, so Alex, when property management starts seeing and thinking like a sales business, that's when landlords are going to stop seeing PM as a cost and start seeing you as an asset manager, right? You've got to be an asset manager, right? And I think what William has done there is he's shown leadership. He knows that you probably don't want to spend that money. You don't want to go and do the work and spend the time and energy. But he's a leader because he knows that his value proposition is he is a house price maximizer, and he's forcing you to do something to improve the value of that asset. So when we have that transferable into property management, right? What you're basically saying is, mate, this is an asset. Please listen to me and do this. So 100%, Alex, there's so many things that a property manager could see that William did, or the property management industry looks at the sales industry and say, what can we learn from that part of real estate that can actually help our landlords? And I think that's what we should be talking about. You know?
It's I think there's value manifests itself, Tom, in a few areas. So value, in terms of the William Chan scenario, there is the value of the house or the price of the house, but the value really at that first point. Now, I knew William, but I'd never had this business relationship with him, but he had the confidence in himself to tell me what I needed to do, because he had the value. He understood the value of what he brought personally. This is conceptual, bear in mind. He had the confidence. We hadn't sold the house. We hadn't marketed it. He didn't know who was going to buy it. He got no one interested. I hadn't even signed a document. Yet he had the self-value to say, Alex, you're going to need to do what I tell you to do. And because of his confidence, I did as he told me. So I look at PMs, Tom, and sales is a transaction, right? I work with William. There's a 4-week, 6-week campaign. The house is sold. I've actually sold 2 houses with him because he was so good. He's a very talented sales agent. But with property management, this is the thing to me, is you have you don't have one chance, but you have a perfect chance when you first onboard an owner to educate them. If you educate them right at that first inflection point about the value of the relationship, like you say, then if you can get them to use, if you have a platform where you can push administration down, where you can get the owner to take responsibility for doing some of their own administration, I've only got to be told to do it once, and then I start to do it, and then I don't question it again.
So you've raised that word there. Education becomes a key word in this conversation, because if you look at sales agents, they're constantly educating their vendors before they go to market, when they're on the market. They're really good at the education piece. And I think landlord education is at a significantly lower level. It would be like real estate sales education is at master's degree level, and landlord education is a little bit like at high school level. And again, as people are listening to this podcast, I don't think the right thing to do is to turn around and say, we've got a couple of people here who appear to be critical of PM. What I'm saying is that if you can upgrade PM education like sales and just give people an idea of things like, the tenant cycle, the market rent reality, the expected maintenance, right? They're going to have less shocks, and they're going to have a far smoother relationship. So education is a big one. But the second one is the confidence in the conversation, right? I think PM people, generally speaking, have got a lower level of confidence in the conversation. Good sales agents, they lean into hard conversations, whether it's a price alignment, whether it's the ability to how you're handling low offers that are coming out of the marketplace. What PM needs to do is pick up some learnings and understand the ability to deliver news that sometimes is not great news, and you're talking about rent reductions, tenant issues, right? If they can learn to deliver that with calm authority instead of hesitation, you will find that your landlords would be a lot better. They want this. Landlords are dying. They're confused as well. They don't want someone that's coming across that is needy, unsure, uncertain. They want leadership in PM.
They do, Tom, and PMs across the board do a valuable, a hard, and an important job. So there's no criticism of what PMs do. This is more a matter of looking at making life easier from the outset and when that inflection point is. And PMs, a lot of PMs are pleasers. You know, they will. What I hear very clearly from some quarters is, and I hear it again and again, Tom. Oh, look, the owner wants this, so I'll go away and do it for them.
So it's funny we're having this conversation, Alex. Now, I have just left a meeting. Listen to this. I just thought about it. I've just left a meeting from a person high. When I say high up, super high up. I mean, the guy basically had just come out of some meetings with ministers from the government, right? I'm not going to talk about who he is. Some people might even know him. But the conversation was about this, Alex. Listen to this. What he was upset about was that he's had a property that has been up for lease for some time. And he said, when they actually went to sign me up, it was all positive. But as soon as I was signed up afterwards, he goes, the onboarding experience, he goes, like, I was confused. What happens next? It was like they were all over me asking for the business. And, you know, that's the role of a BDM. But the onboarding afterwards, he goes, I didn't know what to expect. And I think here's another thing. Sales businesses are really good at the onboarding. They have what is called a set to sell meeting. So they basically say, this is what to expect. They train their clients because it's the unexpected that lands heaviest in life. So what they do is that they're really good at actually saying, this is what to expect. Does that make sense, Alex?
Oh, totally. I've been through it, you know, and you train people around this, and you're absolutely right. And I think that it's a sort of an institutional attitude. I'm not saying, I know plenty of agencies that do not do what we're talking about here. Alistair Shearer, for example, who's with Bell Property down in Mornington. I know that he interviews every owner. Now, he charges in excess of 7% as a fee. And I had him on the podcast a month or so ago, and he was talking through educating an owner because he does it superbly. And when he said, you know, we charge 7.5%, the owner said, oh, I thought it was going to be more than that, because he was able to articulate the value that he brings to that owner in their relationship. We're talking about a property. Now, whether you are an owner that maybe has, I don't know, maybe you're waiting to sell, or maybe you're overseas, but most properties are owned by investors. The PM is the custodian, the individual, and they may change, but the agency is the custodian. It should be a long-term deal. And here's the thing, Tom, you know, we talk about sales. You're talking about a transaction. You're talking about a finite end in an ideal world with a good agent, a 6-week program. Then, you know, you go through the settlement, that relationship's finished. Yes. With a PM, the agency, this is a long-term relationship. There's no reason why, unless they sell the property, that you shouldn't lose that particular investment property on your rent roll. And yet I think a lot of agencies, I just think they don't know how to they don't really know how to go about conducting this meeting effectively. I think possibly, you know, some people don't know how to articulate value. They don't really know what the value is. They know what their agency fee may be, and they know what the value of the rental is on their rent roll, but they don't know what their real value is to the owner. And to be able to articulate that is a really valuable thing.
Most phone calls, and I'm a landlord like you are, most of my property management phone calls are cost calls. They're not value calls. And that's another thing. So when I see the phone number ring, Alex, I know in my head that there is a high percentage that the conversation is going to be about me having to spend some money, right?
Yeah.
It is never about a conversation that comes up with some sort of solution, initiative, something exciting. This is basic. It would be nice occasionally to have the property management team to actually say, Tom, I'm just letting you know, your asset actually went up 14% in the last 12 months. I don't get calls like that, right? In the last, whatever that growth is, right? It's always seems to be a negative call.
And here's the thing, Tom, like it's not hard. Anyone can go and Google a street address for curiosity. If I was a custodian and look, however large the rent roll, whether I'm the principal or whether it's my particular territory. I mean, what do you got? Say maybe they're managing a couple of hundred properties, like to once a year for the rental appraisal. And I know it's not always good news. Sometimes values go down rather than up, but in general, Australian property values do go up. At the moment, we're in a fantastic rental market where rental values are going up in a lot of areas. But I think that the really critical point here is around the asset management. And I'll tell you something, right, Tom, and my business partner, very, very well, Phil Tarrant, who is really has a very high presence on the investor side. Most investors don't know what they're doing, right? You have this professional in the PM that is a professional. They know their local area. They know their marketplace. They understand the realities, the real bare reality of property investment. And they often don't have the courage to let that really come to light. So you've got owners who, and I've said this before, owners who maybe haven't bought that well. But here's the thing, with a long-term relationship with an asset manager rather than a property manager, to actually lean into that and to own it, then you're adding value. But then look, the point of this being is, if you can educate your owner, then you can push down to them areas of responsibility, rather than having the PM as a lackey to run around and do stuff that they don't need to do. Certainly in our situation where they can do it all on their there's plenty of other platforms now that have owner portals. We're not the only one, and I think for PMs who have whatever the software is, where there are owner portals, they should be pushing their owners to work on the portal. To go and,
I find it surprising that you said that comment about that at the start of our conversation, Alex, when you talked about that property manager saying our owners don't want to do that, because I can tell you there is clear research now. People like the self-service, they'd like to go in there. I know that in sales, like there is an absolute obsession by the client trying to find out what's the status of my property marketing feedback offers. So I find that surprising, but I also know that if you sat down when you've signed a landlord up and you said to them something, I'm just going to do this off my head, like you would have what I would call the set to rent experience meeting. In sales, we call it the set to sell meeting. If you just turned around and said, hey, I just want to have a very quick meeting, which is called our set to rent meeting. What we're going to cover is your onboarding. What we're going to cover is the first 14 days, what to expect, what can go wrong, what we will be doing. We're also going to have a strategy session after 7 days, after we've had our first bit of intel from the marketplace. We're going to have a strategy session. In addition to that, we're going to show you the team behind your asset, the behind the scenes experience, compliance checks, the professional photos. If you had this meeting where you actually said, this is what's going to happen, you will find your landlords are going to feel, man, I'm dealing with a pro here. And the minute you feel like you're dealing with a pro, you listen to this person, right? Because they've earned the right to actually say, this is how we do things. But if you've got a young person that they're dealing with, that they feel like this person they're in this job, they actually are using this as a stepping stone to get into some other role, and that is not what a person that owns a $1.5 million asset wants to feel, right? Does that make sense?
It does make sense, Tom. We'll take a quick break. We'll take a quick break there. We will go deeper into this when we come back. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Great to have you with us again. Tom Panos on the show. Pleasure to have Tom here. We're kind of considering really, look, I suppose what can be learned from excellent in sales for excellence in property management. Property management is perpetual. The relationship is ongoing. The relationship for the owner and investor is unbelievably important. And I've said this time and time again, the most important relationship for any investor, it should be their property manager. They're constant. They're a partner. They're a partner in this investment, hopefully for the long term, Tom. But it's missed, I think, a lot of times.
So, Alex, I'd like just to give people an idea of what the appetite is out there from investors, landlords, and the whole property investment community. If you go onto my Instagram, you don't even have to go to my DMs because there's thousands of those. Just go onto my Instagram and just read the comments of all my posts, because the content that I put up on my social is not just targeted to agents, it's actually to consumers. I do both, right?
Yeah.
Just read the amount of comments. People are dying for information on property investment and management of rental properties, particularly now, Alex, that every day between our media, there's at least 5 stories about new reforms coming in. What do they mean? Grandfathering, capital gains tax changes, indexations, right? There is so much information that people are begging for. And I think, as Rupert Murdoch used to say, never waste a crisis. And right at the moment, there is this trending opportunity for leaders to stand up in PM, right? Incredible opportunity. And I think now that we're seeing what appears to be the biggest reforms in property taxes that we've seen in decades, we're expecting to be announced by Jim Chalmers on May 12th. I think this is enough of a reason for people to say, you know what? I'm going to go pro. I'm going to go next level because we can stand out. Alex, you can stand out in PM a lot easier than you can stand out in sales because there's far less people doing it in PM.
You're totally right, Tom. You know, and I'm not the first person to talk about this. Is I'm not suggesting that you and I have just unearthed something. This has been talked about before, but I think it's critical to raise the profile of property management. Too long has it been the unloved second runner to sales, and I think that's wrong. I mean, I fundamentally believe that wrong because I have a significantly greater relationship and have done for the last 30 years with my property manager. But as a profession, it is. I think often agencies are set up, often not always, by a sales agent. Tom, they've been excellent in sales. They're competitive. They're battle hardened. They're a champion in their local market. They're good at it. And PM's like a bit of a sort of an afterthought for them, and so it kind of gets that secondary status. But, and I think a lot of people that come into PM often think I'll do 6 months in PM and then I'll get a chance to go and work in the cool and sexy sales office. But the value of any business is in the rent roll, ultimately, at the end of the day. Is that correct?
100%. So when you sell a real estate business, you get very little, if any, money for the sales side of the business, and you get a significant amount of money from the property management side of the business. So it's not unheard of to hear businesses that get sold for $5-10 million, right? And all that value is in the PM. And why wouldn't it be? I mean, if you're a property manager and sitting here and let's assume you're managing 200 properties, thereabouts, right? And let's assume that you're in a marketplace in, say, Sydney or Melbourne, and I'll just use $1 million as an average price because it's easy. You're a fund manager of $200 million. That's a significant role. If you think about it, you are a fund manager you're managing under assets, a single property manager of 200 properties, 200 million under management. That's a serious role. So you can actually feel that you're doing something really important. But I've got to say, Alex, the truth of the matter is that one of my biggest, leaving the real estate business and being in training and education, one of my saddest things is losing the ability to be an owner of property management, because I was an owner of property.
Yeah, management.
Right. And Alex, you gotta think about this for a moment. If I buy a property for $1 million, right? as a rental, right?
Yep.
I'm going to get realistically, I'm going to get on $1 million, I'm going to get like hypothetically 50 grand a year, right? And then, I'm going to take a few costs out of that. If I buy a rent roll at $1 million, mate, we're talking about you're getting $300,000
Yep.
coming in.
And somebody else pays for all the maintenance.
100%.
Yeah.
It's a great investment. It's a great business, right? PM is an amazing business, right? And we have seen over the last few years, high caliber PM people get rewarded really well, right? But I just don't think there's enough of them,
Yeah, look, you're absolutely right, Tom. You look at, you look at the BDM at Housemark, who you introduced. His name was
his surname's Springer, Jordan Springer.
Jordan Springer.
Yeah.
And he was adding, I believe, something like 30 to 50 organic new landlords a month to that rent roll. And that's a rent roll that grew from nothing to 3,500. So it can be done. And I met him. He's a sharp, focused young man, confident, very humble and polite as well. But there is, he's a go-getter. He's got a cool job. He's growing a rent roll organically.
Alex, one of the great advantages over PM over other parts of real estate is, if you think about it, unlike in sales, you get one strike at a deal, right? It's like baseball. You get 3 shots at it. In PM, you get unlimited shots, right? You miss out the first time as a BDM. Hey, you have another crack at it in 6 months' time, in 9 months' time. With sales, often these people, they sell in the North Shore and they move to the Sunshine Coast, and that's it. It's all over Red Rover. Plus, you've got this ongoing relationship with hundreds, if not thousands, of landlords. If you're giving them amazing service, you have the right every week to be asking for referrals. You can go into your tradespeople and say, listen, you do all our trade work, you make a lot of money. How many investment properties have you got? There are so many creative ways that property management can actually get a real cut through its community. Whether they do corporate specials, they can go to all the corporate companies and say, we're doing a corporate special for all the people that work in this business here in Nissan at Brookvale. We'll give you, 2% off if you give to handle your property. And a lot of these companies, their HR professionals, they want to create value to their employees, right? There are so many untapped opportunities in PM. It is incredible. I just think it's a golden opportunity. And I know that you and your business and manage the product has allowed to give landlords real in the moment understanding of what's happening with their asset, plus all the, the cost effectiveness.
Yes, so I mean, look, I'm sure the same with other platforms. They can instantly access any of their statements. They don't have to talk to their PM to get any statements. For if they're refinancing for end of year, they can see every single transaction in real time. But we've also built tools. So, we've built a whole suite of tools for investors to understand the performance of their property, to look at how it's performing, to look at how it's growing in value, to get a lot of very dynamic views. Now, I think this can be dovetailed with the PM. I want to emphasize, Tom, that I think that the challenge or the opportunity is not the job that property managers are doing across the board. I think they do a good job. I think it's a perception thing and how it is positioned. I'm not critical of what property managers do. They work hard. They care. It's a stressful job. They really genuinely care. But I think, how you articulate what you do, owners don't understand and value what PMs do. There's a real gap between the care factor of the PM and the understanding of the owner. And that, as we go back to the beginning of this podcast, is in education at the front end to educate the owner. And the way you educate the owner is at the front end. I bought a place years ago, Tom, up in Avalon in the Northern Beaches in Sydney. And I won't go through the sort of the ins and outs. I bought it off an agent. I didn't really particularly like the sales agent I bought it off. I didn't wait for them to and they didn't ask me if I was going to put it on their rent roll. So I had a look around. I looked at some Google reviews and I found an agency called Shores, which is in the North Shore nearby. And so I gave them a call. So the BDM came to my house in Turramurra. I don't live in Avalon. She came to my house. She sat down with me and my wife. I thought she was absolutely unbelievable. She spent time. She taught me through their service. I had this very deep personal, and no PM incidentally had ever done that before, Tom. I'd had like an email or a phone call, or maybe I'd gone through a buyer's agent and they found the PM and you never actually speak to them. So I had a very, very long-standing relationship with Shaw's with that particular property and was very happy with them. So you set the tone, you get this inflection point. I'm not saying it's the only chance you get, Tom, but I think the first chance is the best chance to educate the owner, to get them to understand the value, to talk, as you say, about asset management, a long-term, we're in it together. It's your investment property, Tom, and I'm going to manage it for you. And we're going to go down this pathway together.
So I've got to say, Alex, one of the things that PM can 100% borrow from sales is speed to service, right? Speed to service, right? And the other thing that they've done, this person that you've done from Shaw's, it's funny we're talking about this because the guy that cuts my hair recently bought a property, and then what he told me is he didn't give it to the person that he bought the property from to rent it out. And I said to him, why is that? And he goes, you won't believe it, Tom. He goes, I got a phone call from a property manager from another business, and all he did was asked to try and get 30 minutes of my time face to face. And he goes, after I met him, he goes, I just thought to myself, this is the person to go, because the person I bought the property from sort of just said, oh, I can, like, what are you going to do with it? You're moving in, you're going to rent it out. And he goes, oh no, I'm going to rent it out. He goes, I'll get my PM to give you a call. He goes, I didn't get a phone call. Then he goes, about a week later, I got some phone call, and he goes, oh, I spoke to such and such. He reckons that you might want to rent out your property. But in the meantime, he goes, I'd already sat eyeball to eyeball with this guy. So it was both speed to service. This person was there quick, number one. And number two, it was face to face. They understood this is important. This is an eyeball to eyeball meeting, And
I think eyeball to eyeball, face to face is pure gold. Oftentimes now with buyers agents working their circuit, or just, sort of interstate buyers, maybe you don't get that opportunity necessarily. If I'm a Sydney-based owner and I'm buying property in Melbourne, but a call, even a phone call, like a phone call is very powerful, Tom. I'm from a media sales background. I sold advertising for decades on the telephone, and I was very, very good at it, and a phone call is very powerful. You can still articulate everything you need to do. You can build trust. You can articulate value. You can win somebody's heart and mind with a telephone call, just as well as a face-to-face or through a Zoom call.
Alex, I'd love to. Before I came on, I was thinking about this conversation we're going to have. I wrote down a couple of points that I think immediately a property manager should be aware that are low-hanging fruit that would improve the level of service that they're giving. Could I quickly just go through them really
far away?
Right. Number one, like sales business has got relentless follow-up. So what does that look like as an upgrade in PM? Turn landlord and tenant touch points into a system, not a reaction. I'm talking about have a set and forget regular updates with them. Number two, speed to act, which we just spoke about. Understand slow equals broke. The first call often wins the deal in life. I just find that if you're first often, and mate, we've seen this in real estate. REA was first and they're there now, right? They were first there. So being first often is your own thing that you can do that'll make a big difference. Number three, I think property managers should learn the art of storytelling to be able, when they're sitting in front of a landlord saying, let me tell you about this story here, right? So that's a good thing that salespeople do. An obsession with data, right? Because there are certain people, there are certain landlords that are data obsessed, being able to be sitting there with the client and saying, this is the data that you need to know. If it's not rented out in 14 weeks, we've got an X% chance that there's going to have to be a reduction in the rent. So the upgrade there is to be tracking vacancy rates, arrear trends, maintenance cycles. then translate this to landlords on what it feels like when you're dealing with a pro, the confidence in conversations. I think it's interesting in the UK. I find it when I'm in the UK, and I do a fair bit of work in the UK. I do it twice a year, and I'm going there on June the 8th for the month of June. I cannot tell the difference between the sales team and the PM team. They look the same. They look sharp, and the reason why is PM in the UK, they actually do. Whereas some parts in the UK, I think that they're behind. In PM, man, it is a big part of the business, and it's got this personal brand energy that you see in sales. They've got it there in PM. The education piece that we spoke about. And the last bit is I find with a lot of people in the real estate sales bit, they have got outcome ownership, right? Whereas I sometimes feel like in PM, it's not my job, it's not my fault. You know what I mean? They don't take that final responsibility. But to me, this is positive. This is basically saying, what a wonderful opportunity to stand out, because if you do, you're going to end up picking up a lot of market share out of your competitors.
You're absolutely right, Tom. And I think looking at the ongoing relationship, and I've learned this in sales, in media. So when you build trust at the beginning, things become, you get forgiveness in the relationship. I hear stories of how owners treat PMs, and it's abhorrent. Like, it's unacceptable. You know, we hear about tenants being a pain in the backside. You know, the tenants have kind of got the thin end of the wedge. They're trying to find somewhere, you know, it's a tough market. Vacancy rates are very low in most markets. You can kind of excuse a little bit some of the tenant bad behavior. I hear some terrible stories about owners, right? So I think to do everything, to use psychology to build the trust with the owner at the beginning, and it becomes a more forgiving, it becomes a partnership and a relationship based on trust, rather than, as you said at the beginning, being the conveyor of bad news. There's another problem with maintenance. You're going to have to do this. The tenants are going to vacate. You know, I think to get away from that transactional kind of to and fro.
So I've got different property managers, right? And I've got to let you know, I'm going to pick the best one and the worst one.
Yep.
The best one has got my trust, and I never, ever query anything he says.
Yep.
The worst one, I don't trust. And every time I've got to basically interrogate everything that they say. So when there's trust in the relationship, the terms become negotiable. When there's no trust in the relationship, I'm second guessing everything. Has he got a second quote? Has he sure really diagnosed the problem? Is that the problem, or is the problem that there's leaves in the gutter and he thinks that there's a leak on the roof, right?
Yep.
You're second guessing it.
Yep.
Trust is such a big, big thing in life, but in PM, it's everything.
Tom, I think that is a very solid note to finish on. I'm really grateful for you taking time to catch up. You're a busy man.
Pleasure.
I wouldn't mind getting you on again at some time in the future, because you give a great insight.
You're a great organization. You're a great stakeholder in the whole real estate space. At one stage, you were just known as the people that produced content for trade to read and rankings, but you're significantly more than that. You're doing stuff in your business that is helping landlords, tenants, and real estate agents run their whole space in a better way. Tom,
thank you very much for joining us. For everyone else, thank you so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate, you know, the listens that we get. We're building audience. This is actually one of the best performing podcasts. It's the strongest performing on the REB network. So I'm very thankful that you join us. You listen to my thoughts. Keep the feedback coming. We'll catch up with you next week.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs, and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property, or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.